Hey guys, Simon here, and today we've got a very special guest on the show. It's my good friend Tom Farrow. He is the head of strength conditioning for England Sevens and also the director of Arete Performance Strength Conditioning. Tom, thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thank you very much for having me, mate. It's good to see you.
Today we're gonna talk about strength conditioning for rugby, conditioning, speed, power. Hopefully, we'll get some great insights from one of the top performance and elite performance sports strength and conditioning coaches. So, Tom, do you want to give the guys a bit of a background into how you got your job, how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, it was a bit of a windy road to get to S&C, to be honest. So I dropped out of school or sixth form when I was 17, sort of did a year of it, quite disillusioned with where I was going, had no ideas, to be honest. But I'd always trained, I'd always played lots of sports. I'd always, through that time, written training programs for myself. So I was probably really into it before I even knew what S&C was. Like I read like Bruce Lee books and follow his training programs, or Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding and all that stuff. So then I dropped out of school, ended up working in the city as a quantity surveyor for a year. Absolutely hated it.
I did not know that about you, actually. That's
the whole backstory, you see.
Spoiler alert.
And then, but yeah, I just hated it. I fell into it completely by accident, really. Just needed to get a job, and it paid some money. So I ended up doing that for a year before I dropped out of that. And then it was like another year or two, I think, of wandering around, doing every job under the sun, all the labouring for all sorts of trades, security, everything.
I guess whether it's building your body or building a building, it's kind of like similar.
Well, I would think of it like that. I'd be carrying stuff upstairs thinking this is good for me. I'm training still. And but then eventually, I think I went into a night school, did my fitness instructor qualifications over like one night a week. I used to have to remember having to drive my bike 7 miles each way to Enfield in order to do it. And then after that, I sort of think that probably kicked me off onto the learning thing. And I realised I could maybe carve a path for myself through learning that I didn't necessarily buy into before that. And I think that made me think about doing my level 3 personal training qualification. And then that sort of, which I didn't do then, I ended up going to an access course at Kensington and Chelsea College to get me into sports science. And then that got me into university, and I went to Loughborough for a year, did a foundation course in physics because I wanted to study sports science there, but they said I could only study sports science and physics because I had no qualifications and no grades really. So I did the foundation year and then decided I didn't want to carry on doing physics. So left there and then ended up at St Mary's and found the strength and conditioning science course there, which was fantastic, and got me to the southwest of London, which was probably brilliant because there were so many opportunities in sport around there. And then from that course, I ended up getting an internship with Wasps Rugby, and sort of from there just progressed up in terms of getting a paid role there. Moved on from there to doing some of my own contracting stuff, a bit like contact skills. I've got a bit of a wrestling background, so I did some contact skills for rugby with some teams, as well as personal training over that period. And then when ended up, I think a year after that is when I got the assistant role with England Sevens at the same time as I was working with Speedworks, where I met you, and also GB Canoe and the English Institute of Sport. So that was a bit of a crazy year. And then 2 years ago, the guy that was the head of strength conditioning Sevens went to baseball, Major League Baseball, and then I got the opportunity to step into the head role. So I've been doing this for 2 years.
Wow.
Along with business.
Stepping stones, progression, right? That was nice and sequential, obviously, in terms of your progression as you went along. For anybody out there who's listening, just before we go into the strength and conditioning for Sevens, what kind of advice do you have for anybody who's looking to become a strength and conditioning coach? Obviously, you've done multiple different things. Let's say somebody's like 17, 18. Like, what advice would you give them, kind of in terms of their direction and like somebody who's been through the system?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be coaching. So, like, you have to, whatever that form that is, wherever you can add value. So when I was 17, I obviously couldn't add much value to a professional sports team or even maybe an amateur sports team, but based on my own experience of training myself, I could train my friends and stuff like that. So I was writing training programs for my friends, and as most people start out doing that sort of thing. And it's just accepting the journey, accepting that, you know, you don't need to jump to be the most qualified person within 2 years. I struggled with that a lot, and probably still do in a sense, and just accepting that journey I think is really important. You will have to probably do a degree now, strength and conditioning wise. There's most people would have a degree, so it's a very competitive area. So it's understanding that. With our interns at WASP, I used to say, because people talk about networking, and network is important and who you know, but more important than that is being the best you can be. So if you're a great coach, people will be like more likely to recommend you to stuff for the appropriate level. And you know, but a lot of people in the industry, because they think network is important, they try and create links with people, and they're almost artificial links rather than like meaningful links. Whereas the network takes care of itself if you do good work and I suppose, you know, create links with people naturally, and you're open to that. So be the best you can be would be my simple advice, really.
It's a really great piece of advice, that idea of, is it to be seen or to be? Do you want to be the best you can? Like, can you, what does that require? Like, do you want to be seen as the best, or do you want to have done the work and actually be the best, and know within yourself, I guess, that you've got enough experience and you've educated yourself and you've gone out and practiced to the highest level that you can. I think that's a really, really great piece of advice for anybody who's looking to start down that journey. So let's go into what does the day in the life of the head of S&C for England Sevens look like a normal day?
Okay, the normal day at the moment is before all of this happened.
Yeah.
There's a lot more sleeping now than there used to be. So I live in Leamington, Spa, so I'm 2 hours away from London, really. So a normal day, say start of the week on a Monday, would be waking up around 4:30, and then I drive down to London, partly to miss the traffic and partly because it means I get there and I've got an hour and a half to myself in the morning. So
you still go on the bike, or is it? Do you go in the car now?
Not on the motorway. I had to give up my bike when I moved. I miss it. So wake up early. I'm not an early bird by any means, but I don't want to sit in traffic and waste time in that sense. So I'll try and get down there, aim to get to the Lensbury where we're based for about 6:15 when the gym opens there, so I can do a bit of gym. There's a sauna there, and I appreciate the sauna and that time and space. Just it's almost like a meditation time, really, because the day's manic. Like once the day starts, you're making 100 decisions like throughout the day. That's going to affect whether people, you know, improve or potentially get injured if you make the wrong decisions, and you have to interact with the physios, the coaches, and then all the players as well. So it's a very fast day. So I really appreciate that space in the morning just to almost be quiet, really.
Yeah, clear your head, definitely. And I guess all those micro decisions, they all add up over time, right? That's the whole thing, is there's that compounding effect. So it's not a case of like, you obviously got the big program, but then within that, each of those decisions on a daily basis, I guess, add up. So I guess
and I think it's the best way of looking at it is appreciating how important every single little decision you make is in the players program. So like at any one time, so we've got 18 fully contracted players this year. So I'm trying to sort of keep in my head, once we're into it, you know, where is each person at from the total distance they've run in a week, or total distance they've done the day before versus what the likely total distance is going to be today. And then you add into that the high speed distance, changes of direction, maximal speed exposure, and then you've got your gym program that surrounds that. So what are they, you know, what sort of makeup are they as an athlete? Are they twitchy fast, or are they like muscular, powerful, strong, that sort of thing? And then you've got each athlete will have different things you have to think about in terms of injury history. Some of them won't be able to do certain exercises like squats just because of a certain injury history or the way they're built. And then you have the training, and then things happen in training. You know, are you going to do extra running after with them, or are you going to pull back? And then when you come into the gym, based on what they've done in the morning, are you going to you're going to change the gym session to do more or less based on what they've done in the morning. So there's all these decisions all open. And then like around that, then you've got rehabbers who are on completely different programs. So you're chatting to physios and coaches about them and how they reintegrate. And yeah, so it's full on. And I love that.
It's very complex. I was going to say there's lots of complexity there, isn't there? So
yeah, there is. But it also comes back to like basic principle of stimulus and adaptation, essentially. And that's the same for training anyone. You know, there's a point that you'll need to stimulate to them a point where they can adapt, but you have to always be having a guesstimate of where they are on that curve. That it was like our Arete curve, and our logo is push them down too far and they'll get injured or ill. And you've got to try, and then you're always trying to guesstimate where are they at in that curve. You never really know. There's ways you can measure it in different sort of outputs and stuff, but really you never know. So
we're biological entities, aren't we? We're not machines. We're not like a bike or whatever. I guess it's
and I suppose jumping back to that in terms of advice for S&C coaches, sort of like stuff to go from off the beaten path with, because there's the almost accepted standard S&C course, which itself is probably quite comprehensive. There's so much. The reality is, in terms of training people, the courses could be 15 years long and they still wouldn't complete everything you could really learn about the human body. So there's so much to it. It's fascinating. So I think like anchoring your understanding of S&C in or like basic physiology and biology and anatomy or such. Like there's people like Robert Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's an amazing book about how human beings respond to stress, and that's essentially what we're managing as strength and conditioning coaches. We're managing load or we're managing stress, and whether that's physical stress, emotional stress, whatever, that's what we're trying to manage. And we don't want to push people too far, but challenge them as well. So it's such a, in terms of performance, is this careful balance you're trying to strike at all times.
Amazing. Such good advice. So let's just go back to when you've been in, you've done your gym session, you've done your sauna, done your meditation. What's the morning session look like for the guys? So is that like?
It depends. So usually on a Tuesday to Thursday or Friday. So our week basically would be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That'd be our normal week. So we're quite good in sevens that we don't have to deal with week to week games. So the weeks that we're not playing, the non-tournament weeks, we can actually push them fairly hard in training, because we know they've got good amount of time to recover on the Wednesday off and the weekend off. So Tuesday, Thursday and Friday structure would usually be rugby in the morning and then gym in the afternoon, and then there might be some conditioning at the end of rugby depending on where they're at. And then Monday structure is a little bit different. We'll do speed first thing in the morning. We'll have like a 45-minute speed session, and then we'll do gym, and then we'll do rugby in the afternoon. And then I'll usually do a little bit of extra speed on the Thursday morning, but it's almost like an extended warm-up before rugby.
And what's the crossover? Because obviously I know that the old school philosophy was like you have your skill session and then you do your gym in the afternoon. But I guess now you're at that level where you and the technical coach, I guess there's this enmeshment of, I guess, like the things that your fitness parameters that you're tracking in the morning session while they're trying to do their skills work. But then obviously, I guess, how does that all work? So what's the crossover?
So we'll have meetings every morning with what we call just MDTs, multidisciplinary team meetings. And it's like the physios and the coaches, everyone basically will be in a room and we'll just talk about what the session is. So the coaches will be talking. I mean, we would have had like a longer term plan already in terms of the coach to send through, right, over the next 4 weeks, this is the plan for the sessions. And then I can advise on, okay, load wise and intensity wise, that makes sense. But then on the day, obviously things change all the time. Players are in and out, just managing niggles, not pushing them too far, that sort of thing. So we'll have a meeting every morning and just chat over what the details of the session content. I'll advise like who needs to, and with the physios, who needs to maybe pull back a little bit, who's actually can push on more than we thought they might have been able to. And then I'll talk about maybe what I'm going to be doing in the warm-up. I'm going to do some speed, so I need a little bit longer, or I'm going to do this type of conditioning at the end. So I'll keep you updated whether we're going to chop that or we're going to do it based on how things go. So there's that interaction every single day. With the speed, it's not something, because of the way the week works out in terms of people's time and the coaches, that Monday morning is for the coaches a time where they sort of get together, speak about the week, reflect on their practices and where they're at. So speed will be me and the physios out. But with our speed program, it's not just about pure linear speed. We do that, but we also do a lot of lateral movement. And then it's also trying to move that technical ability into tactical environments. So we'll use some tactical environments within speed as well. It's trying to understand the big picture, because we know they get exposed to those tactical environments in training a lot anyway. So we don't need to go mad with them, but we do need to help them transfer those skills across into rugby. So it's not just about being fast. It is about being fast, but it's about how do you then integrate that into rugby. So say if I improve your 10-meter time from 1.66 to 1.62, which would be a pretty significant improvement at the elite level.
I was gonna say, if only I was running that fast.
And that's pretty fast. But the you know, that's 0.04 of a second improvement. Whereas if I can get you to read the game quicker and you can recognize an opportunity sooner, that might buy you half a second, maybe even a second. So that's where it's like, it's understanding how important the base foundation of physical ability is, and we're always trying to build on that, but also understanding that actually the technical and tactical understanding is so much more important. So even though my speciality is in the physical, I have to appreciate where that sits within the bigger picture and links to technical and tactical and everything else.
Talked about this a little bit on the a few episodes before about this idea of art and science, and that the science is improving the times and the art is applying the improved times to the situation that you're in, I guess. That's a really great
point. And I think like real science is art in a sense. You know, it's there's science is always being, you're pushing the boundaries of it's explorative, isn't it? You're trying to push the boundaries of what we understand, but understanding that none of it is ever final, I suppose. So it's with the you're led by science in the sense of like basic biological understandings, physiological understanding, and some of those have been proven more than others. So you can have more faith in that that's going to be the right, that's going to, things going to work.
Evidence behind it type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like your stress adaptation, that's a well understood biological concept. So that it's about understanding where the science is, because I think there's too much in sports science at the moment which would come under scientism, which is almost like the cult of science, of being like, look, this has been researched.
Scientific dogma. Scientific dogma or bro science.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think in sports science is a relatively young science compared to like physics, for example, where, oh, well, such and such a paper says this, so therefore that. And you can, for every paper that says one thing, there's usually another paper that says the opposite. So it's about finding the stuff that you really can be sure of, or as sure can be. But then also
meta-analysis, I guess, at the same time as well, where you're seeing consistency between papers, I guess.
Yeah, but also appreciating your intuition and your experience as well, and that's almost like the first most important thing. And because that's what you know what you've experienced, and you know what you can see. You sort of have a good idea of it anyway, and then you're trying to relate that to the science that you've come across. The almost like the theory, and then you're always bouncing back between these two things.
Problem solving using your brain. That's awesome. So you've done the morning session. The guys, I guess, go off and have lunch today. Everyone goes and has lunch.
Yeah, we have lunch, and then probably from the end of the morning session to the start of the next session, there's probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And
did you say conditioning goes in at the back of the morning session? Did you say? So you do?
Yeah, go on the end of rugby. So I just put it on the end of rugby, so it's all pitch based.
And what does that look like for anybody who's interested in doing England Sevens conditioning session? What do they need to be doing?
It changes all the time. Like if I was going to say one thing that team sports should be basing their basic conditioning around, would be like tempo runs, and it's not conditioning in the normal sense of you get really tired. But
what's a tempo run? Sorry, just before you.
A tempo run for us would be generally 100 meters, and they're looking to do that in about 15 seconds. Ooh. And then we'll do that on a rolling 60 or 70 second clock. So what you do then is you're getting 45 seconds rest at least, and for they're fit guys, so that's not tough for them. It's not aerobically challenging really. But what it is exposing the body to these high speeds repeatedly.
And how many reps? So you'll do 15-second 100 meters, 45-second recovery. What type of reps should people be looking to?
It depends where we're at in the season, and it depends where we're at in the what the session's been like before. Because one thing I have to keep in mind is that there's an absolute limit to what most people are going to be able to manage in a day from a high speed or total distance exposure. So I'm always considering that. So if we're looking at high speed meters, which will be above 5 meters per second, we very rarely go over 1,500 high speed meters, and some might go a little bit over that, and we'd almost never go over 2,000 for a day. because there's obviously what we're trying to work to is what they'd be exposed to in the tournament day, and there's only so much above that we need them to be able to manage. So more isn't always more. Like, you know, yeah, we could always do more, but is it going to make you better, or is it just going to expose you to risks that you don't need to be exposed to?
And are you trying to keep the quality high on those? Like, say somebody wasn't fit enough to be able to compete, would they stop at their kind of
relatively high? Like, it's not quite the same as how tempos would be used in athletics, in sprinting, because sprint is such a pure, or any running like distance, is such a pure movement-based sport that the technique is absolutely everything. So the technique of how they run in rugby is important and helpful, but I'm not going to stress over it as much as I would if I was working with a sprinter, for example. So we want good quality, but we also appreciate that if you artificially get them to run with a good technique all the time, you know that's not going to happen when they get onto the pitch because of fatigue. So then actually, do you want their body to be almost used to running with not perfect technique? Because otherwise it's going to be at higher risk of being exposed to that if it all of a sudden breaks down under fatigue. So it's really trying to understand this balance between, I suppose, the physical capacities and technical abilities and the rest of it. And
quality and quantity, I guess, is like, it's really, really insightful. It's actually, I've never actually spoken to you about this kind of stuff. So it's, as a bit of a S&C geek myself, it's really, really interesting. You've mentioned, just before we go on to like any of the gym stuff that you do in the afternoon, you mentioned about like some of the metrics you use there. You spoke about, obviously you kind of, I didn't catch them all, but it was the meters per second. Like, what are the type of metrics that you're using during training? Are they doing, do you have GPS or heart rate, or what type of stuff can you tell the guys about?
Yeah, so we don't have heart rate at the moment, and that's just because boys weren't wearing it for tournaments. They didn't feel comfortable wearing it in tournaments, basically. So it sort of became a bit like, well, if we don't have the tournament data, I'm not going to stress too much about linking it to there. And that's also because I sort of have a basic understanding of what's happening with their heart rates in sort of main sessions anyway, from having used them with teams before and having used them with those guys before. So I stopped stressing too much about the heart rates over the last couple of years.
Just on that, what were you seeing? Like, was it just spike, like peak, like obviously lots of peaks, or what how does it work?
Yeah, it's an intermittent sport, so you're going to see like massive peaks and then they recover. And heart rate information is massively useful in terms of understanding how they recover. So we use it in parts of our conditioning, like we'll use it with some of our longer slow runs, and they'll have a heart rate to stick to. But I think it's one of those things that heart rate monitors will probably eventually be integrated within the shirts, and they will just give you information about
injected straight into us, so that we've got like biofeedback data all the time, which would be great.
Yeah, it might not be too far away. And I think that's the thing with all the technology. There's the technological insight you get, but then there's also the logistical discomfort that might create. So it's almost trying to get that balance right between what we need to know and what would be nice to know.
Yeah, definitely.
With GPS, there were GPS all the time for every session, and so the key metrics would be total distance, which is just how far they run any speed, high speed meters, which would be above 5 meters per second.
Yeah.
Sprint speed meters, which would be above 7 meters per second.
Yeah.
So we use absolute zones. What we might, if we was working with 15s players, we'd probably use relative zones, just because you'd get more. There's more difference between what's required from players. Ideally, you can look at both. So absolute is almost like how well are you able to keep up with what's necessary for the game, and relative is with relative to yourself, and what you're usually exposed to. So here we go, getting invaded.
That's all right. Hello.
Are you okay?
How you doing?
Hi, Simon.
Hi, Simon.
Does Daddy help you do your strength and conditioning?
No.
No. Do you show him? You show him.
Do you lots of jumps?
No.
Lots of jumps.
And then so you got sprint speed meters to be above 7 meters per second, and then change the directions, which is essentially accelerations plus decelerations. And the number we'd look at is above 3 meters per second for that. And there's obviously zones above that, but that would be the key numbers we look at. And then also exposure to how many times have they been exposed above 90% of top speed. So I want them to be exposed to at least that speed once a week, from a protective point of view, because if they're not exposed to it and then all of a sudden they get exposed to it, it's going to be a big spike in what they're used to.
think this one.
Okay,
It's
nice.
a swimming pool.
Okay, have fun. Mummy put it on for you.
Yeah, but I'm going to. It doesn't know if I'm pushing one.
Alright.
Because I stole it. And
Go on.
No, that's really helpful. So let's just jump in. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. So let's just jump into gym sessions. So what kind of stuff is it? What are you doing in the gym with the guys?
Yeah, so through the week, say a normal pre-season week, would probably look at we wouldn't do completely upper body or completely lower body. There'd be a mix in each, but they'd be biased quite heavily towards upper body or lower body. And Monday would be upper body, Tuesday would be a lower body focus, and then they got the day off on a Wednesday. So I know that at the end of Tuesday, they've had 2 decent days of training, and I can sort of stress the hamstrings a little bit, knowing that they've got a day to recover the next day. And then the Thursday would go back to upper body, and the Friday then would be lower body again. And then general structure for the session would be something probably power related, whether it's like strength for speed, so like heavier power, or speedy strength, so lighter power. And then I'd probably do some strength stuff. And at the start, it's the first 4 movements we do are going to be quite like global movements. Whereas after that, it gets a little bit more accessory. So whereas I'm focusing on like overall output through power and strength. And then once it gets down to accessory, I'm focusing more on like key areas and exercises that they might particularly need for them as a rugby player, in terms of what rugby players would get exposed to, or them as an individual in terms of what they might need to just bring certain areas up. Most sessions would be broadly in that structure. And then we might additional stuff at the end. We might put stuff like trunk extras. We sometimes do like wrestling derivatives at the end of sessions, carries, all sorts of stuff that
Nice.
at the end.
Okay, brilliant. If you had like a couple of key exercises, like the king exercises that you'd give for rugby players, what are the ones they need to be doing? Was it like Nordics or what type of stuff?
Pretty basic. I'd always think of like I want a quad dominant lower body movement generally, so I'm looking at back squat, trap bar, deadlift type of movement. I'm looking at something posterior chain, and then I've split that up into sort of hip extension dominant posterior chain, so like an RDL, or a knee flexion dominant posterior chain, would be like a Nordic. And then we'll have a push and a pull, and then I'll just rotate upper body push and upper body pull. So I'll rotate the exercises a little bit, but they'll be structured around like those basic movements. Lots of jumps. We do all sorts of jumps. So you've got what I'd term like hip dominant jumps, which would be like a box jump, and then you've got ankle dominant jumps, which might be like a drop jump with like so stiff at the knee almost, but very twitchy on the floor. Hurdle jumps might be more ankle dominant jumps. So you're almost organising your session and progressing it through a year based around these key areas. But then you're going from like an extensive focus of jumps, which would be like lower intensity, repetitive, high volume, to intensive, which would be very high out, like absolute maximal effort, much less volume, and it's obviously a high intensity. So you're always progressing along these continuums, really, from a force focus early in the season, heavier weights, to velocity focus later in the season, later weights. We might even take weights out more and more. Certainly heavier weights as the season gets, or the tournaments get closer, we'll do less of that. So it's all about teaching. For me, it's not about, it's all connected to the movement. You're teaching the body how to act. I'm trying to teach the body how to manage forces that it's going to get exposed to in a rugby environment, essentially. And so it's all about how you work with the nervous system in order to do that.
Just like managing that load, I guess, aren't you? I guess and one of the interesting things, actually, I think for anybody that's kind of plays week in, week out, any rugby players that play week in, week out, one of the things I've learned kind of going through the system is this, that I think in the past we used to do too much. Like when in season, we used to do too much. So you'd end up getting to your game at the weekend and you'd be like completely knackered. And I guess what you're saying here is that in the pre-season, you work the guys hard and increase capacity so that then when you get into the season, you can obviously drop some of the volume out. And that allows them to really get the benefit, obviously. And I guess when they start playing, I guess the actual tournaments themselves act as conditioning, and it's about, you're just preparing them, because that's going to be them at their best. That's going to be them at their kind of physically most tested, isn't it? That's the best conditioning you can get, because that's the game. So, and you're right. I think it's still quite prevalent in a lot of teams in sport, not just rugby, but through football. And I think there's still
a lot of places that bias towards doing too much, I think, because of a feel that they need to be doing something, and that sort of attachment to fatigue, almost, to feel like, oh, we're killing ourselves, therefore we're going to make progress, and
it's working type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to be smarter than that in order to really make progress, especially with elite athletes. So that for me is, it doesn't matter how fit you are if you're tired. That's so important when it comes to tournaments. So making sure you're going to perform at your best if you're fresh. Okay, so the hard thing with 15s or football, something like that, is trying to get that balance between stimulate, so it doesn't just drop off through the season, but also make sure that they're fresh as possible for key games. You're gonna, when you've got, so like when we work with 15s club we've got a contract with for Arete, it's about understanding there's games that you need to focus on, so they need to be fresh for that, and there's other games that are less of a focus, so they don't need to be quite as fresh. So
You're popular now, it's fine, don't worry. No, there's some really great points there about trying to balance. Yeah, I guess it's like trying to target, know what those games are, know what the important games are, know when they are, know when you want to be peaking for. But yeah, no, I think it's some really great advice. Now, I'm going to let you go because I know
they understand that, don't they? I was going to say, like in boxing, the week before a fight, they've had the build up. They don't then smash themselves a week before the fight. They freshen up. And I think team sports, because of the repetitive nature of it, sometimes we forget that actually we need to freshen up. And most places will do something towards it, but I still think they err too much on they end up doing too much. So
definitely.
Balance is important.
Right, I'm gonna let you go because we've been on for half an hour. We'll probably get you back on again, and we'll talk about some of the other areas, because we've got such a wealth of knowledge. It's been really insightful, just kind of working through your sevens day. Just we're big on education here. What books are you reading? What books are you reading at the minute? What books would you advise anybody?
Well, I talked about Robert Sapolsky at the start. Yeah. I've just picked up his it's actually the laptop is balancing on it right now. His most recent one's called Behave. It's absolutely fascinating. It's all about human behavior. It's huge, but very readable. Like he's the way he teaches is brilliant. Links it to so many things, and the way it's structured is going from when we behave, what's happening like the moment we behave. So like neurally, what's happening in the system, what's happening a second to a minute before, what's happening a minute to an hour before. So it's like starting to talk about like hormonal changes, and then it goes all the way back to evolution. So it's just looking at our behaviors in every single almost like perspective.
Serotonin and body posture, right? The old
lobsters.
Jordan Peter's lobsters.
So it covers like so much. So that's been fascinating. I'm always reading like I've got just piles of books surrounding me. I sort of dip into lots of different stuff. I've been enjoying Phil Jackson's books after watching The Last Dance. He was the coach through that Chicago Bulls period when they were successful. Amazing coach, like big into his Zen. So I've been interested in him for a while because of that. And then when I watched that documentary, I was like, I need to read his books because I've been meaning to for a while, and they're brilliant. They give me faith in sports, that you don't need to be this brutal win at all costs model, and actually it can be a bit more about developing the whole person and everything that goes with that. So yeah, there'd be two that I'd recommend. I could recommend a long list, to be honest, but
that's good. There's some good options. So if people want to find out a bit more about Arete, have you got website, social media? Where do they?
Yeah, so our website is Arete, ARETE-performance.com.
We'll put a link. We'll put a link below, guys, if you want to get any more information on what Tom's doing. What's on there? Like, what can people access on there?
That's just been an overview of some of the different areas we work in. We're actually in the process of about to just update that. I think we work in a variety of different areas. So basically elite sport, youth sport, which would include schools and as well as like we do classes, and then sort of individual one-on-one work. We work with general population, which we call like the everyday athlete program. So taking the principles from performance basically, and how do you structure that around your normal your life, but keep this about progress, not just blasting yourself like we were just talking about there for sport, not just blasting yourself for the sake of it, but about progress and integrating that with the rest of your life. So that's the everyday athlete program. And then we've got like coach development we work with. So we work with we do like performance lyceums with some of the best coaches in the world. And we also have the coach development series, which is us talking about our speed and agility processes, conditioning, and eventually we're going to do contact skills when we're allowed back out of lockdown. And then also we've got like a corporate program we've started last year. We've been working with some like managers, and it's like leadership coaching almost. And then there's also the people talking about corporate wellness, so we're into that, but also like it's wellness and performance. So it's like, you know, not just about staying healthy, but also there's a lot of people in the business world that are into triathlons and marathons and all sorts now. So it's about how, again, do you integrate that with your wider lifestyle. So there's a bit of information, all that on there in terms of what we do. Then there's the Twitter page, I think is Arite Perform _HQ. And it's the same for the Instagram page. And there's
links to all those in the comment section below, guys. So it sounds like there's something on there for everybody: business, schools, kids. There's obviously for athletes, and then also as well coaches as well. So
with the business, I've worked in all of those areas over my career, and sort of feel there's value to be added in all those areas. And my business partner Tappers has also worked in all those areas as well. So collectively, we've got a lot of experience between us in all those different places, and we just wanted to build little programs that we think link together and learn from each other, but can really add value to those areas.
Guys, definitely check those links out below. Tom, really appreciate you coming on today, buddy. Guys, make sure you hit the like or subscribe button if you found today's episode helpful. Tom's been fantastic. And yeah, hopefully we'll get you on again soon, buddy. Really appreciate your time.
Cheers, man.
Speak to you soon, mate. Cheers.
Take care, man.